What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. I know it's Monday. Mondays are the worst, but what better way to get through your Monday than talking some Packers football here on the Pack a Day podcast right here on YouTube. Always appreciate you taking some time to join me. Today, I'm going to be talking about Christian Darrisaw, the offensive tackle for Virginia Tech. I'm going to start by, kind of breaking down who he is as a prospect, going over where he's kind of projected to go in the draft, and then ultimately if and how he would fit with the Green Bay Packers, which of course is the most important aspect here. Before I get to that, I kind of want to go over my change in mindset with the offensive tackle position over the last few seasons. I've always been somebody that's really preferred a offensive tackle, especially if they're playing left tackle, but either one really, who has some agility, who can kind of get from point A to point B. I don't need a fast 40 time, but I really want to see them be able to, kind of have some recovery speed. I want to see them be able to kick out and, kind of take care of edge rushers who are more of that speedy, bendy edge rusher around the edge. Like that's kind of always been my mindset of what I've wanted in an offensive tackle. Some of the smaller, quicker, more athletic offensive tackles are kind of been the ones that I've preferred. A great example of a player like that was a couple years ago, a player who I was completely in love with in the draft, Andre Dillard from the University of Washington, who up to this point has not turned out. Now, he was behind Jason Peters his rookie season, was projected to start a season ago, and then I don't know if it was a torn ACL, I forget what it was, but he was out the entirety of the season based on a training camp injury. So he hasn't exactly had the opportunity, but most reports out of Philadelphia were that he was behind the eight ball, and even though he was set to kind of start at left tackle, they kind of had Jason Peters brought back. They were going to put him at guard while Dillard was at left tackle, but bring Peters back just in case Dillard wasn't, up to the task. So he, up to this point, mostly due to injury, but even without it, it hasn't necessarily lived up to that first round expectations. But he was a classic example of more of a speedy edge rusher, pass protector who could handle some of those speedy edge rushers, had the agility, had the flexibility, could get out, and really was a top tier pass protector in college. And what we've seen sometimes happen in the NFL is, we're now getting more of the bigger physical edge rushers, right? And Green Bay, you don't have to look further than Green Bay with your Preston Smiths, your Zadarius Smiths, your Rashawn Garys, guys who can get under your pads and drive you back and really not so much bend around the edge and get to the outside where you can be pushed, past the quarterback and the quarterback can just step up in the pocket, but rather guys who can collapse the pocket and, really get interior pressure from your defensive tackles. And again, guys that are just going to collapse the pocket around the quarterback. And meanwhile, this has been happening. It's definitely been an emphasis around the NFL for the quarterback to get rid of the ball quicker and quicker and quicker, which is negating some of those edge rushers who take more of those bended loops around the edge. And even if they're a quote unquote speed rusher, the quickest way to the quarterback is from point A to point B. And the longer that you're going, it just takes longer to get there. And what we're seeing is from some of those edge rushers, they're not able to get there by the time, even if they do a perfectly executed speed rusher on the end, by the time they get there, a lot of the times the quarterback's getting rid of the football. So that hasn't been as productive. And we've also seen, from an NFL standpoint, this more, Kyle Shanahan style offense and just a variety of offenses in the NFL, no matter which offense you're running, where you've got more emotions and jet sweeps and play actions. And what's happening is edge defenders have multiple responsibilities, right? So it's not like they're just lining up and ready to tee off at the quarterback. They've got to be aware of traps and cuts and, end arounds, and they've got to make sure they're setting the edge. They've got to be prepared for a million different things. Now, of course, on obvious pass situations, it's going to come down to, winning those one-on-one battles. But a complete offensive tackle, somebody who can, win physically and win inside and, be a really strong run blocker, even if they have maybe a little bit less of that agility and, around the edge against those quicker pass rushers, that's not necessarily as important as it once was. And we're even seeing, a lot of the pressure that's generated start coming from, Aaron Donald's a freak, but from the interior because it's the quickest way to the quarterback and it's the quickest way to disrupt things. And again, those edge rushers have them be able to collapse the pocket rather than try to get around as quick as you can. That's going to create, lanes for quarterbacks to step up, whether it's a Tom Brady who can live in the pocket and kind of dance around a little bit, whether it's an Aaron Rodgers who wants to escape the pocket and generate those big plays, or if it's a Kyler Murray or someone like that who, if you, again, go around the edge and get behind him, now he's got an alley to step up and he can take that sucker 80 yards at any given moment because of his ridiculous speed and athleticism. So there's been a change in that dynamic around the NFL. And because of that, I've had to kind of flip my thought process for what type of offensive tackle that I want. And it's not just because an Andre Dillard didn't turn out up to this point. It's just because of how things have changed with all those things that I just mentioned across the NFL. So I'm now kind of looking for somebody who has the strength, who has the physical ability, somebody who has the ability to kind of anchor in their pass sets and isn't going to allow you to bull rush your, and get that penetration in the pocket, going from point A to point B and trying to get under the offensive lineman's pads and get back into the quarterback and make them uncomfortable. Like, I want somebody who, again, can sit down, squat, anchor, not move anywhere, or not allow the edge rusher to move them backwards into the quarterback. And again, if they get beat around the edge, once or twice a game, a lot of times you're going to be able to route them around. The quarterback's going to be able to step up. I'm not as concerned about that anymore. And it's definitely something you still want to be aware of. But again, my mindset has certainly changed here. And this is all important because this is very much relevant to Christian Darrisaw. So let me start breaking him down as a prospect because, of course, that's why we're here today. So 6'4", 314 offensive tackle out of Virginia Tech. Didn't test at his pro day, so we're not going to get those agility numbers, which is somewhat important if we're trying to predict Packers offensive tackle picks because they have seemingly very much cared about short shuttle and three cone and agility scores. And if they've tested poorly in those, Green Bay's generally stayed away from those type of prospects. My gut tells me that Darrisaw wouldn't test extremely well in those sort of things. Tough to say, though, without it happening. So maybe he's on the board because he didn't test terribly in those sort of things. But that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to kind of keep an eye on because, again, he did not test in the pro day, specifically, obviously, for those agility drills. So going to be tough to tell if he's going to be high on Green Bay's board or not with not knowing that. But should be able to play left tackle or right tackle. He's played over 2,300 snaps in his career. And the big thing that you always want to look for is he's gotten better every single year. He's gotten better from 2018 to 2019 to 2020 every single year, really playing his peak football this past season in 2020 for Virginia Tech. So you want to see that consistent growth. You want to see somebody that's showing that they can grow year in and year out and has just played a bunch of snaps and hasn't just been a one-year wonder playing 500, 600 snaps or something like that. So Darrisaw kind of checks all of those boxes. Some of the things that I saw on tape and some of the things that really stood out, first of all, is just pure brute strength. He is insanely heavy-handed. So what does that mean? So what you're looking for here is when he makes his initial punch on the defensive lineman, just how jarring is that? And he is phenomenal in that regards. Like when he gets his hands on you, it is violent hands where you're seeing, edge rushers and defensive linemen, just completely disjointed and like they're paused and they're taking a step back because he's got violent hands that are going to get right into you, and he gets to his spots as well. So it's one thing to have violent hands if your hands are all over the place and not meeting their marks, getting under the pads or depending on where you want them on any given play, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. It doesn't mean a lot, but he's hitting his marks and he's got violent, physical, heavy hands that are jarring for opposing defensive linemen. Not only that, but he has the torque to throw defenders to the ground. You will see him blocking players and just, literally, rip them because it sounds like he's holding, but just throw them physically to the ground. And you'll see some of those pancakes as well. And I think that's really one of his ultimate strengths is his strength, but his ability to kind of move people in the running game as well. He can be a very, very good run blocker. He was in college and he has the ability to be that in the NFL as well. You also see him for somebody who, again, is more of a physical player. He has agility to the second level. He easily can get to the second level and pick off linebackers, safeties, who's ever in his way, and he will maul them. He will absolutely get to the second level and block them off the screen if given an opportunity. There was another fantastic play where, he's pulling and a cornerback is rushing up and he just annihilates this corner that was coming off the edge who never saw 6'4", 314 Christian Darrisaw coming. It was a beautiful, beautiful play. And Darrisaw just annihilated him. You also see him take very smart angles to the football, whether it's trying to get to the second level and get to the linebacker, whether it's, while he's kind of trying to get back in his set, He takes very, very smart angles and knows how to get from point A to point B in the most efficient way possible. He has the agility on screenplays as well, which is something that, again, in a Matt LaFleur system, you want him to be able to get out, get to the second level, and be a lead blocker on some of those screenplays. No concerns there whatsoever. And one of the things that you love to see, one of the first things that I'm always checking is how often is he on the ground? And for Darrisaw, I watched 3 games, all 22, and then some other cut-ups and things like that. But you go through and you're watching, and he's the only time he's on the ground is if he pancakes somebody. So very good balance, and he stays square, and you're not seeing him fumble, get to the ground and stumble or anything like that. One of my favorite plays of his actually was, like, you'll see every once in a while where when you've just got a massive humanity and all the offensive linemen and defensive linemen battling, where like every once in a while another offensive lineman or a leg will pop out and just trip. Well, that happened to Darrisaw. I think he got like a knee to the side as he's just getting into his motion, and like 99 times out of 100, you see an offensive lineman on the ground after that. Like, they're just not expecting it. They have a very set pattern of how they're trying to get to their block, and anything that remotely throws them off, especially if it's basically another player tripping them, like, they're just going to be on the ground. And Darrisaw just like basically fought through it, kept his balance, and was able to maintain his block, which was ultra impressive and definitely one of those plays that stood out to me. Very balanced, good knee bend, stays, has good pad level, especially considering his size. And again, he just looks physically imposing. I know like 6'4", 314 isn't the biggest guy in the world, but he plays much bigger and much more physical than that. You also don't see him grab or hold or jump off sides or false start or anything like that. So he's very consistent in that way where, he's confident in his play that he doesn't have to go out and grab or hold somebody. And, he doesn't have to try to like overcompensate by trying to get an extra jump or, try to jump the snap or anything like that. Like, he's just consistent. And again, something that you love to see. His lateral agility is definitely good enough. He can get low and cut people and execute, well executed cut blocks, I should say. And his durability's never been an issue. He's missed only 1 game at Virginia Tech. So he checks a ton of these boxes. Now, what are some of the downsides with Darrisaw? The demeanor is interesting. As I mentioned, you'll see him get to the second level and maul some people. There'll also be times where he's just super casual, and he will basically he'll be like kind of blocking someone, and he just kind of like decides he's done. And it's not consistent in any way, shape, or form, but it definitely shows up enough where you're like, well, that was weird, because again, for the most part, he's a very good blocker, and he's very intent, and again, he's gotten better every year. You can tell that he's working on his technique. You can tell he cares, but there'll be plays where it's just like very nonchalant, very casual. And one of the things that you love to see in an offensive lineman is that nasty physical demeanor where they just want to obliterate the person in front of them on every play. I'm not sure that you see that from Christian Darrisaw. And there's definitely plays where you do. And again, there's plays where he is ultra physical and he's just annihilating the person across from them. But it's almost due to just more raw strength and talent than it is due to, this is just feel when you're watching him than him wanting to just maul the person across from him. So you want to see maybe a little bit more of that nasty demeanor. You don't get that from him. And you see him just kind of stop on some plays uncharacteristically. And it's just kind of weird to see. So that's one issue. Speed rushers around the edge. He's got good enough lateral agility, but he's not somebody that's going to pounce out and, just has those, like he's walking on air, just those quick feet. It's not anything like that. This is, again, more of your physical offensive tackle, but he's quick enough. The big concern I have here with speed rushers is he doesn't have the recovery speed. And so where you can run into issues is if somebody gets around him, great offensive tackles will have something in their repertoire to be able to spin back and still get back in that play. If he gets beat with quickness across the edge, it's almost like he's stuck in mud, and that quarterback better be getting rid of that football or he's going to be beat. And that sounds really bad, but what you're seeing is like, in a 3-game period, maybe it happens like a couple times. And, when you're playing 60 some snaps a game, you're going to get beat every once in a while. And again, remember what I mentioned at the onset is, it takes a while for edges to get around that way. And a lot of the times in today's NFL, quarterbacks are getting rid of the ball quicker. And a lot of that, that eye candy for defensive ends is taking in, and the play action and everything else is taking that quick first step out of their arsenal. So it's definitely something to be aware of. And it's something that in the past would have given me massive concern. or at least a level of concern. Darrisaw doesn't have it with regularity, so I'm okay with it. But definitely, just again, something to be aware of, but not anything that I think is, completely detrimental to him as a prospect. Overall, to me, he's a very easy first round grade. I think late middle of the first round to early, so basically around like 25, somewhere around there, I think is a very easy grade for Darrisaw. I went and looked at some recent mock drafts. One had him going 19 to Washington, two had him going 20 to Chicago, and one actually had him going 29. Adam Rank from NFL.com had him going 29 to Green Bay. So somewhere in that range, probably 19 to 29, is probably Darrisaw's range in this draft. I definitely think he's better than some of the Titus Howards, and I'm not saying that in hindsight, just going off of their evals from previous seasons, like a Titus Howard, Isaiah Wilson, some of those. I think he's, he would be a better grade than, which, those were first round tackles. So I definitely expect him to be a first round pick. Definitely think there's a chance he could be there for Green Bay. I don't see them necessarily trading up for him. Just doesn't seem like completely their cup of tea at tackle that they would aggressively move up for him. But I think if he's there at 29, he at least has to be in the conversation. I think if he did get to Green Bay and they did select him, I think you immediately make him your starting right tackle. Put Billy Turner at left tackle until Bakhtiari gets back. You hope that's just a few games. I don't think it'd be advantageous to put, Darrisaw at left tackle and then basically say you're never going to play there ever again, because Bakhtiari is going to hold that down for the next, however many seasons. So it doesn't make any sense to, put any sort of legitimate effort into Darrisaw at left tackle. So put him at right tackle, let Turner start at left tackle until Bakhtiari gets back. Then when Bakhtiari gets back, if Darrisaw's playing well, then you probably kick Turner inside and you probably kick, John Runyon Jr. to the bench, go Bakhtiari, and then Elton Jenkins, Lucas Patrick, Billy Turner, and then Darrisaw at right tackle. If Darrisaw struggled and it didn't look like he was ready to, maybe play in his rookie season quite yet, then you put Billy Turner at, back at right tackle. You keep Runyon Jr. at right guard. You put Patrick at center, Elton Jenkins at left guard, and you let Darrisaw get a little bit more experience under his belt before he has to play. So I definitely think that this could be a smart pick for Green Bay. I've said all offseason I see Green Bay, there's a really strong chance that Green Bay goes offensive line round one just based on the talent that's there. Towards the end of round one, the depth of the offensive line in that first to early second round category, and Darrisaw could definitely be that type of individual. So definitely a player to be in mind of as the NFL draft rolls around. That's going to do it for me. Make sure to subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. Make sure to check out Jake and Ross on today's audio version of the podcast, going through a mock draft as well as some of the North Dakota State prospects. Yeah, for those who don't know, Ross covers North Dakota State quite regularly as one of the main writers for, beat writers for North Dakota State. So make sure to check that out. Really great episode today. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.